I turned 80 last year. Didn't throw a big party. My daughter insisted on getting a little cake, so we had some. She flew in for the weekend. Neighbors dropped by for coffee. There were smiles, a few good stories, and then, like most things these days, it all got quiet again. I remember sitting in my chair that evening, house all cleaned up, leftovers in the fridge, the TV still on low, and realizing just how still everything had become. Now I'm not new to quiet. I grew up in a time where silence was normal. We didn't need to fill every moment with noise. But this wasn't the same kind of quiet. This was the kind that starts to echo a little. The kind that makes you wonder if anyone out there is still thinking of you. The kind that creeps in between meals, between phone calls, between the sound of your own footsteps. I thought retirement would be restful. And sure, in many ways it is. But no one really prepares you for the part where you go from being needed every day to being remembered every once in a while. Now, I'm not here to make it sound worse than it is. This isn't a story about being miserable or falling apart. It's a story about what happened after I stopped pretending I was fine, after I stopped filling my calendar just to feel like I mattered. After I stopped fighting the loneliness I didn't want to admit I was feeling. And what came next? Well, it wasn't what I expected. It was quieter, slower, but it was good, honest. If you've ever wondered what it really feels like to grow old, not just age, but truly grow into this season, maybe this will feel familiar. And if you're not there yet, but heading this way, maybe you'll hear something here that helps you when the silence shows up at your door. The ache you don't talk about. You don't notice it at first. Loneliness, I mean. It doesn't knock on your door or announce itself. It just slides in one day quiet-like. At first, I called it peace. I figured after a lifetime of noise and responsibility, I'd earned a little quiet, a slow morning, an afternoon nap, evenings with nothing planned. But the quiet started to change. Little things. I'd catch myself talking out loud while making eggs, like my wife was still sitting at the table. I'd leave the radio on after the program ended, just so the room didn't feel so empty. I started checking the mail twice a day. Not because I was expecting anything, just because. And the phone stopped ringing as much. The holiday cards got fewer. Friends, the ones still around, they weren't getting out as often either. That's the thing no one tells you. You don't suddenly feel alone. You just slowly stop feeling included. Now, I'm not saying I was miserable. I wasn't. But there was an ache I couldn't name. A kind of fading. Not pain. Not depression. Just the sense that no one really needed me anymore. And that, I think, is what hit the hardest. When you've spent your whole life showing up for others, kids, coworkers, neighbors, and then one day you realize no one's really waiting on you anymore. Well, it does something to a man. So, I did what they say you should do. I stayed active, joined a few groups at the senior center, started going to church again, took a class on birdwatching, though I couldn't tell you a finch from a crow if you paid me. I smiled when people asked how I was doing. Said the usual, I'm keeping busy. Just taking it day by day. And I meant it most of the time. But every night, when I sat down in that recliner, the same thought came back. Is this it now? Is this all that's left? Not in a bitter way, just honest. It's a strange thing, to reach this age and still feel like you're waiting for something. Like some part of life might still be around the corner. And maybe that's why I kept showing up, joining things, smiling through it all. Because deep down, I was still hoping something, or someone, would see me. Not as the old guy, not as a name on a mailing list, but as a man who still had something in him. Even if I wasn't sure what that was anymore. The Tuesday I didn't show up. I remember the day it started to shift. It was a Tuesday. Nothing special about it. The kind of day you don't remember until years later when you realize something small changed you. I was supposed to be at the senior center that morning. Chair yoga at 10, cards at 11, lunch if I stayed. Same schedule every Tuesday. I had even laid out my clothes the night before, like I always did. But when I woke up, I just couldn't do it. Not because I was tired. I'd slept fine. No aches worse than usual. But something in me, something I couldn't quite explain, just said, not today. So I didn't go. I made coffee but didn't turn the radio on. I didn't check my phone. I didn't make a list of things to get done. I just sat at the table and watched the steam rise from my mug. It felt strange at first. Like I was breaking a rule. Like I should be doing something, proving something, at least appearing productive. But I didn't move. And slowly, minute by minute, I started noticing things I hadn't paid attention to in years. The creak of the floor under my chair. The sound of birds out back. The way sunlight spilled across the countertop. I hadn't sat in that kind of stillness, not truly, since my wife passed. Back then, the quiet was unbearable. I filled it with errands, volunteering, anything. I told people and myself that I was staying strong. But really, I was running. And that Tuesday morning, I stopped running. No one called to ask where I was. No one checked in. And yet, for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel invisible. I felt rooted. It wasn't joy. Not yet. But it wasn't sorrow either. It was something in between. A kind of peace that didn't ask anything of me. I didn't know it then, but that was the first day I stopped trying to fight the loneliness. Not because I'd beaten it, but because I realized maybe it wasn't the enemy after all. Maybe I was just supposed to sit with it, like an old friend I hadn't seen in a while. One I didn't always like, but maybe needed to understand. The box I forgot I was avoiding. A few mornings after that quiet Tuesday, I found myself standing in front of the hallway closet. I hadn't meant to open it. I was just passing by, same as always. But this time, my hand reached for the doorknob before I even realized what I was doing. Inside, buried under a folded quilt and a box of winter scarves, was another box. Taped shut, no label. I knew exactly what it was. It was the box I packed up the week after my wife died. I had never opened it since. We all have boxes like that. Sometimes they're real. Sometimes they're just parts of our minds we keep locked up. But this one was real. And for the first time in nearly 20 years, I carried it out and set it on the table. I didn't cry when she passed. Not in front of people, anyway. I kept busy. Funeral arrangements, paperwork, casseroles from neighbors I barely remembered. I cleaned out the closet, donated what I could, boxed up the rest. Everyone kept saying how strong I was, and I let them believe it. But the truth is, I didn't feel strong. I felt like a man trying to outrun something he knew would catch up eventually. And it did. It caught up that morning as I untaped the box and saw her handwriting again. On birthday cards, on old grocery lists, even one note on a napkin that just said, "Don't forget to laugh today. M." I sat there for hours, read every letter, smelled the faded perfume on a scarf I hadn't seen in 2 decades, laughed out loud at a photo of us trying to put together a tent on a camping trip we absolutely should not have taken. And I cried. Not from pain, from presence. She wasn't there, of course, but she wasn't gone either. Not really. Because I was remembering her honestly, not through some cleaned-up version I shared at family dinners, but in all her little details. The way she always overcooked the rice. The way she snored softly when she was pretending not to be asleep on the couch. I had buried all of that in a rush to be okay, to move on. But sitting with that box, I realized you don't move on from love. You carry it, sometimes in plain sight, sometimes in closets, sometimes in aches that don't show up on scans. That afternoon didn't make me feel better. It made me feel more whole, because the truth is, I hadn't just put her away. I had put part of myself away too. The soft part, the sentimental part, the part that missed being needed, being known, being loved in the daily ordinary ways. And I knew, if I wanted to find peace in this chapter of my life, I had to bring that part of me back, not for anyone else, just for me. Learning to move slower, on purpose. After I opened that box, and everything in me that came with it, something shifted. Nothing big. No one else would have noticed, but I did. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to fill the day. I just had to live it. So I started waking up slower. I stopped looking at the clock the moment my eyes opened. No more rushing through breakfast, just to feel like I was doing something. Instead, I sat by the window while the coffee brewed. I listened to the radiator click on, the birds doing their morning gossip. And when I sat down to eat, I ate with both hands on the table. No newspaper, no TV, no phone ringing. Just me and the eggs. It sounds silly, but it felt real. I'd forgotten what it was like to be present, not just in the room, but in your own skin. I started going for short walks around the block, not for exercise, not to get out of the house, but just to move, to feel my feet on the sidewalk, to notice how the air changes at different times of day. I said hello to trees I'd never paid attention to. A maple 3 doors down that leans just slightly over the sidewalk. A tiny bird bath in someone's front yard that always has 2 finches fighting over it. The neighborhood cat that ignores everyone unless you hum to her. And I began writing again. Just a few lines a day, not poetry or stories, just thoughts, some memories. A list of things I missed, a list of things I didn't. The funny thing is, the more I stopped trying to make the days meaningful, the more meaningful they became. There was no performance, no trying to impress anyone. I wasn't getting things done. I was just being alive, gently, honestly. One day, I noticed something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not happiness, not excitement, something smaller, a steady kind of contentment. It showed up in little things. The way my shoulders stopped tensing when I was alone. The way I started humming without realizing. The way food tasted better when I didn't eat it in a rush. And I realized something else. Maybe joy doesn't always arrive with a celebration. Maybe, in this season of life, joy is what happens when we stop chasing noise and start making peace with the quiet. I still had hard days. That didn't go away. But the days didn't feel empty anymore. They felt like mine. Not borrowed from someone else's schedule. Not dictated by loneliness or pressure. Just simple. Real, and more than enough. Letting the world back in, one hello at a time. Funny thing happens when you stop fighting the quiet. People start showing up, not in crowds, not all at once, just gently. One afternoon, I was sweeping off the front porch, something I hadn't done in months. I used to think, what's the point? No one visits, no one sees. But that day, I wanted the porch clean. For me. That's when my neighbor, George, passed by. We'd exchanged nods before. Polite waves. That was the extent of our friendship. But this time, he stopped. Said, "Porch looks good." Then handed me a bag of oranges from his tree. Told me he had too many, and remembered I used to mention how my wife loved them. That moment, I don't know. It stayed with me. It wasn't about the oranges. It was that he remembered. We ended up sitting out there for an hour just talking. Not deep stuff, baseball, old cars, his grandkids, nothing remarkable. But it felt grounding. The next week, he brought over soup. I told him it was too salty, and he laughed like he hadn't laughed in years. And that was how it started. Not a grand re-entry into social life, but a slow drift back toward connection. I didn't chase it. I didn't try to get out more. I just made myself a little more visible, opened the curtains, sat outside when the weather was nice, took my time at the grocery store instead of rushing through like a ghost. One day, I saw a woman from the park, someone I'd passed dozens of times, walking her dog. She stopped, said she liked the book I was reading. We ended up talking about Hemingway for 15 minutes. Now we wave when we see each other. And sometimes she sits for a few minutes while her dog naps in the grass. It's small. All of it is small. But small doesn't mean empty. It means manageable. Real. Earned. I realized I don't need a room full of people. I don't even need daily conversations. What I need, what we all need, I think, is to be seen. Genuinely. Even if it's just by one or two people who remember that you like your coffee black or that your knees hurt when it's about to rain. I used to think relationships had to be busy to be meaningful, full of plans and calls and check-ins. But these days, I've come to believe something else. Stillness leaves room for true connection to enter quietly. It took me a long time to understand that. When you're always talking, always doing, there's no space left to receive. But when you slow down, when you're okay being alone, that's when the right people find their way back in. And when they do, you welcome them not with neediness, but with peace. Not to fix you, not to fill a gap, just to sit beside you in the same silence you used to fear, now shared. A quiet kind of joy. I used to think joy had to be loud. You know, laughter in a room full of people, holidays with family everywhere, stories told over clinking dishes and second servings. And when that version of life started to fade, I figured maybe joy had faded with it, like it was something I had aged out of. But I was wrong. Turns out there's a quieter kind of joy. It doesn't knock, doesn't announce itself, it just arrives, slips in between moments. One morning, I made toast. Nothing fancy, just bread, butter, a little cinnamon. But I sat down and ate it while the sun came through the window, hit just right on the table, warmed my hands, lit up the steam rising from my mug. And in that moment, I thought, this is good. This is enough. No applause, no one watching. Just me, my breakfast, and a kind of peace I hadn't felt in decades. It kept happening after that. Little things. The weight of a heavy blanket on a cold night, the way fresh sheets feel after laundry day, a cardinal landing on the fence out back, just long enough to notice. The sound of the mail slot clicking, even if it's just junk. You start to see joy not as something you chase, but something that greets you. If you're slow enough to notice, I still have hard days. Days where my knees ache worse than usual. Days where I miss my wife so much I forget how to sit still. Days when the silence tries to creep back in, heavy and unwelcome. But those days don't define me anymore, because now I know they pass. And between them, joy comes back, not in fireworks, but in flickers. It's like learning to hear a softer language, one the young don't have the patience for. But when you're older, when you've had enough noise, enough rush, you start to crave it. The slowness, the stillness, the gentle joy that doesn't demand anything from you but your attention. I used to think I needed more to be happy. Now, most days, I feel grateful just to be here, still breathing, still noticing, still me. No version of myself to live up to. No performance to keep going. Just the honest, aging, open-hearted version of me. The one I finally learned to sit beside without judgment. And that's joy I never expected. But now I wouldn't trade it for anything. What I know now. I don't know exactly when it changed. There was no single day, no moment where I stood up and said, "Ah, yes, I've made it. I'm not lonely anymore." It happened slowly, the same way the ache had arrived. One morning, I realized I hadn't felt that hollow space in my chest for a while. The TV hadn't been on in days. I wasn't checking my phone every hour. And when I sat in my chair in the evening, I didn't feel the urge to escape it. The silence that once felt like a threat. It had become something else. Not my enemy. Not even my friend exactly. Just part of the room. Part of me. You see, when I first retired, and especially after I lost my wife, I felt like I was slowly disappearing. Like the world had moved on and forgotten to take me with it. I thought I had to fight that. Fill every gap. Make myself useful. Stay busy. But I was wrong. What I needed wasn't distraction. What I needed was to come back to myself, and that took time. It took stillness, and honestly, it took being a little broken for a while. But here's what I know now. Being alone and being lonely aren't the same thing. Loneliness is the feeling of being forgotten. But solitude, the kind you grow into, not the kind that's forced on you. Solitude is where the real healing happens. It's where I remembered who I was before the titles. Husband, father, manager, neighbor. And it's where I learned who I still am, even without them. I'm still a man who notices the way sunlight moves across the table. Who enjoys the first sip of hot coffee more than he used to. Who finds meaning in writing a letter, sweeping the porch, waving to the dog walker with the noisy little pug. No one's asking for my schedule anymore. But I still make the bed every morning, still hum when I cook, still take walks just to hear the gravel under my feet. I don't need to be needed in the way I once did, because now I've made peace with my own company. And in doing so, I found a kind of joy I never expected. A joy that's not loud or showy. It doesn't post itself on Facebook or come with invitations. It's the kind that shows up quietly, in small moments, in slow mornings, in being okay with who you are, as you are. So if you're sitting in your own version of silence, wondering if this is all there is, I'll tell you, it's not the end. It's just a different beginning. One you walk into slower, but with more of yourself intact. And on the days when it feels too quiet, too still, just know that someone else out here knows exactly what that feels like. You're not the only one, and you're not disappearing. You're arriving, right here, right now, exactly as you are. Quiet and true. If you've stayed with me this far, I just want to say thank you. Not for listening, really, but for sitting here with me, wherever you are, however your day's been going. I've spent a lot of time in my own company, and these days, I don't take it lightly when someone chooses to spend a little of theirs with mine. I'm not an expert in aging or loneliness or any of that. I'm just a man who's lived a long time, who's tried things the hard way first, and who, eventually, learned to stop fighting what life was trying to show him. So, if you're in that place now, if you're in the quiet season, wondering what to do with the stillness, or afraid of what it might mean, I hope something in what I've shared has felt true to you. I won't pretend I have answers. But I can tell you this, there is peace on the other side of resistance. There is still joy, small, steady, and yours for the keeping. And you don't need to become someone else to find it. You just need to stay long enough to remember who you've been all along. So, take your time. Walk slow, breathe deep, Let the quiet teach you what noise never could. And if someday you feel like telling your own story, even just to yourself, I hope you will, because it's worth hearing. You're worth hearing. Be well, friend. And if you ever forget how far you've come, just sit still for a minute. You'll feel it right there, still with you, still strong.